So what are the features of social movements? There are various features. And remember that not all social movements are necessarily successful, but it depends on how you choose to measure success. Sometimes a movement that doesn't necessarily inspire political change or affect policy early on can still set the foundations for changing perceptions around certain ideas or certain groups of people in our society. So that is pointing again to the culture or the cultural change around an issue. So firstly, social movements require a critical mass that is recognised and visible. Think of the swarms of people we saw turning out to the climate action rallies at the start of bushfire season in 2020, or the hordes in the streets in masks during the Black Lives Matter protest against the backdrop of COVID-19. You need to be seen to be heard, especially to be effective and to affect change. Secondly, there must be a set of common causes with an aim to address collective problems through collective action. Think of the civil rights movement in the US and how Australia followed suit. Think of the protests, the sit-ins, the freedom rides, the lobbying, a common cause to fight racial injustice, and the sheer number of people required and willing to do this even at their own risk. Thirdly, a social movement needs to have a continuing presence beyond a limited campaign. I'm going to be slightly controversial here, but perhaps you will recall the Women's March in 2017 that immediately followed Trump's inauguration. While it was the largest single-day protest in US history, it was criticised for not really going anywhere in terms of having no aims to achieve. Yes, women were angry that Trump was elected, and boy, did they march. It was certainly a spectacle, but one that was short-lived. There was no real action thereafter. Fourth, social movements are broad and loosely organised. They may involve individual organisations, but they extend beyond these. For example, members of the Animal Justice Party, Animals Australia, PETA, etc. might come together to protest something like live exports from Australia, and these would certainly be useful to raise the profile of such a cause. But largely, the movement would comprise of ordinary citizens who have their own reasons for marching or lobbying against such a cause. And then finally, social movements must have more than the goal of seeking political representation. Ideally, they need to engage in public debates outside the electoral process. This points more to Christensen's definition of affecting cultural change rather than simply changing policy. For example, the legalisation of gay marriage in Australia, although a huge win, needs to go further in changing cultural attitudes towards the LGBTQI+ community as a whole.